Good morning. It's Charlene San Jenko from Powerhouse, and I'm welcoming all of you to another amazing Gather for Her conversation. We meet weekly on Wednesday mornings for an opportunity to collect and share exploring collective wisdom. And this morning, before I welcome my co-host and our special guest, I would like to just take a moment and acknowledge the lands on which we live. I'm coming to you from beautiful Gibsons, BC on the Sunshine Coast. So I'm honored to live on the lands of the Squamish First Nations, and just encourage you to reflect for a moment on where your home is located in gratitude. And also, while I do introductions this morning, if there's one word, one intention that you have for this morning's conversation, I just welcome you to dump it into the chat. See what kind of intentions come up for us today. As you do so, I would like to introduce you to my colleagues who make these conversations as juicy and amazing as they are. And Christina Benty is my co-host. Christina is, most of you know her, and if you are new to Gather or you're listening to the recording after the fact, Christina is a retired politician. She's a jazz singer, and she's the owner of Strategic Leadership Solutions, which is a consulting firm designed to assist teams in building a culture of excellence in leadership and governance. She's a mom. She's a grandmom. She's a former two-term mayor, and she's an incredibly fun dancer. So that's another conversation. I'd also like to introduce you to Tina Overbury, and Tina is our story tracker. I've described her to someone this week as I've never been in the presence of someone who can listen as presently and deliberately as Tina, which is just such a skill and a gift. And Tina works closely with Powerhouse as well as individuals and organizations who feel called. She's a storyteller, performer, professional listener who works with narrative and story structure as a vehicle for human connection. Good morning, Tina.
Good morning.
And I also want to introduce you to Sharon Marshall. She is our Indigenous sister from Vancouver Island. Sharon is our graphic recorder. And I'm not sure if you've had the opportunity to experience having a conversation graphically recorded, but it's very, very powerful. She brings an Indigenous lens to the conversation, and it's so neat to be able to share in a visual form what happened in a conversation. Sharon is also, I should let you know, the founder of DIVA Training and Staffing Solutions and the president of Creative Collaboration, Inc. Sharon, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And that brings us to our special guest for today. So these are my peeps, and help to create such a special experience. And we ripple it out to all of you, welcoming you for this conversation today. We are really excited to introduce you to a good friend of mine, a colleague that I've admired for a number of years while I've been exploring the space of social impact. And Joanna Buczkowska-McCumber, a hyphenated, very tricky name, is our guest today. Personally, I just want to let you know a few things about Joanna from my impression of her. She's an incredible leader. She's a firecracker. She's bright. She's smart. She's quick. I enjoy every conversation and interaction that I have with her, which are not enough. I crave more. And formally, I'll let you know that she's the executive director of League of Innovators, which is one of the things we're talking about today. Our theme for June is building impact. And Joanna is doing that by mobilizing the next generation of leaders from discovery to acceleration. So an extremely important conversation that I think we're all pretty passionate about. Good morning, Joanna.
Good morning. It's so lovely to be here.
Thank you so much for making time for today. And I just wanted to kick things off and with a question to just kind of bring it into the space. So we're talking about building impact. We're sitting here in the middle of June in 2020 with a kind of the most interesting year that many of us have ever experienced. And I'm just wondering, in this context, if you could tell us a little bit about your work as a youth entrepreneur advocate, and kind of what that, like, what's crystallized for you during this time, what's fallen away, and what you're laser focused, like more passionate than ever with just the situation that we're in right now as leaders. I just wanted to kind of kick it off from there.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks, Char. Yeah, it's amazing to be here. Thank you for inviting me. I'm joining you from Vancouver Island as well. I'm in Victoria on the unceded Coast Salish territory of the Lekwungen and the Wasanic Nations. So super lucky to be where I am as well, especially during these times. And so my work, spans the last 13 years. I've worked in the sort of the intersection of impact and business, and really seeing it develop over the last 13 years has been a unique place to sit at, because when I started in my work in social impact at the University of British Columbia, running the Center for Social Innovation and Impact Investing, we were just at the beginning of bringing these topics to the surface for people in the business sector, certainly people in the impact investing space. And what's been interesting over this period of time, these conversations have started to, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, trickle into the mainstream slowly, and now have become, they've taken a foothold in mainstream media. And I think why that's happened really is because we've seen some really big companies take ownership over social impact, and not just, CSR, corporate social responsibility, but really embedding, the concept of being really good social and environmental citizens in the world, not just creating profit. And we've seen that really be driven by the entire B Corp movement, and also many, many players in North America, but also around the world, really driving business and impact forward, and that it's something that's not only possible, but actually can be really profitable. And with the idea that profit is not always the end goal, right? I think at the end, you're trying to create an institution and an organization that's like a moving machine. And there is no end goal, really. You're just trying to move through the process and build something amazing that people can engage with, people can really get behind. And so in my work, I've obviously worked at that intersection, but a lot of that time has been spent working in this space, supporting young entrepreneurs and young people really just starting to get excited about this possibility of being able to create their own future. Because at the end of the day, people that start businesses, people that start nonprofits, people that start organizations on their own are really developing their own future in their own right. And what we've seen, and it doesn't just span my career, but well before, is that too often young people are being, they're being just drawn to very traditional career paths, because that is all that's presented to them in the traditional education system, and that still continues and is prolific from K to 12 into post-secondary. Those standards, even though we're talking about social impact being something that's more possible in the business world and in the market, yet education hasn't really caught up. And if it has, it's only been relegated to those universities or Ivy League schools. So it's actually not that accessible to most people. And what we see is young people under the age of 25 that we work with. So we at League of Innovators, we work with young people across the country to really help them understand and find their own potential, to then, follow through and build their startups, build their organizations, and we help them, grow those and find the networks, find the capital, find the support that they need. But the first step is really understanding that you can do this. And I think a lot of people, young people, but I think it goes across generations as well. It's not just young people, don't recognize the power of their own potential and their own voice. And I think what the last couple of months have shown us is that things can happen, things can change really quickly. And the people that are most able to adapt are the ones that are going to come out on top or be able to survive. And that in itself presents an opportunity. And what we've also seen is companies and organizations that have been already sort of conditioned or prepared to create social impact were better positioned to deal with this adversity that the pandemic brought. Mm-hmm. And then certainly in the last month, with the emergence of Black Lives Matter movement all across North America and beyond, it has shown us that, your voice matters. And, you as a consumer and you as a person, your voice matters. And if we collectively, raise our voices against things that we believe are wrong, that is a lot of power. Mm-hmm. And that certainly has massive impacts on companies. We've seen a ton of CEOs step down because they've not been empathetic, aware of what's going on around them. And so, we have seen now the real impact of citizens standing up when they didn't think their voices would be heard. And I think that's a big message that we've seen really translate to young people in this past couple of months. When the pandemic first hit, a lot of us in the youth space were really worried that young people, and they still do, there's a lot of issues, there's massive unemployment. Already here, we're seeing 42% unemployment of young people that are either finishing university or transitioning to the next semester. It's massive unemployment and probably going to grow as we move into a proper recession in the next 18 months. But what we've also seen is young people stepping up to the plate and really just being innovative and not letting this set them back, but really being creative and knowing that their voice, if they know that their voices and what they do is going to be respected and is going to actually be taken seriously, they have an immense amount of potential. And I think that in itself, what we've seen is young people step up to the plate and do incredible things, even though a lot of people expected youth to really, go back to their parents, don't, not really be creative perhaps, but we've seen quite the opposite.
I think that everything that you're saying, it's a little bit of, I think, what we've all been feeling, like that the uncertainty is also pushing us to keep expanding and exploring the edges. And it's interesting, and I'm going to deflect to my two co-hosts to get some of their thoughts, like how to go deeper into this conversation. But a couple of pieces that you brought up that I just wanted to highlight are the very things that I think you're teaching, and you're really helping young entrepreneurs fully understand and experience are the things that we all are needing as we head into the next phase. And it is adaptability. It is resiliency. It is being able to walk forward and not have all the answers. But the one piece that you said that I loved is this is a powerhouse thing. Like when you see it, you can be it. Mm-hmm. And young people, when I was 18 years old, if I knew there was an opportunity for me to create something, like Powerhouse, I would have gone to school for it. It wasn't presented to me. It wasn't even a possibility at that time. And we're not going to say, what year that was. But I'm curious, Christina, of everything that Joanna opened up with this morning, what what hit you, what really resonated for you so far?
Well, obviously there's lots in what Joanna just shared, but what stood out for me, partly because of my work in systemic change, right? Like I'm super curious about how, our institutions and our systems operate. So the government, but I'm super curious. What hit me is when you said that education hasn't caught up. And one of my earlier questions when you were speaking were, what were some of the barriers? And then I started writing down my own barriers, and I was like, one of the barriers is the limited beliefs of the education system. So people within the system and their limited beliefs around traditional career paths. And I know that the education system is trying to break out of that. However, they have a long way to go. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? What kind of advocacy can we do? Or how can we look at promoting that that change within the education system? And are you seeing it at all levels?
That's a great question, Christina. I think the education system and some people within it are trying to catch up and are trying to figure out how to bring in some of these big topics and big changes to the way we deliver content, the content we deliver. But when we look at the larger system, at least in Canada, it is, it's very dissected across provinces. It's large and it's not connected with each other, and it's so hard to implement change when the components don't all fit together. And so for us, at least with the work I do at League of Innovators and some of the other work around like nonprofit impact, is we really try to work with the champions and the folks in the system that are trying to explore, because I think the education system wants to do right by our youth. I don't think they have bad intentions. It's just a system that's been built for so long, and it's hard to change. As you say, systemic change is difficult and takes time, and it takes a lot of different parties to do their part to create that change. But I do often, I believe that change also happens at the grassroots level. So it has to happen with some of these champions, some of these people that are already like, okay, I'm going to test this new alternative education out, or this new course or this new topic. And so our work at League of Innovators has really been focused on finding those individuals. One of the things that we've created is what we call the Innovators Academy, which is a free online platform for young people, but it also doubles as an educator resource guide to bring into their classrooms. Everything from, yes, how to start a business, how to really, market your business and all those topics. But we also dive in into a lot of personal development work, because we recognize that is a massive part of actually when we look at successful entrepreneurs, look at successful social entrepreneurs, executives, you name it, personal development was a big part of their journey, but they often didn't get into that journey till well after university, because that's not part of the system. And when we think about it, when we look at the role of coaching, not just in personal development, but when you look at athletics, coaching is something that happens all the time, yet we don't bring that into the world of our work, which is, we spend all our life working essentially. And so thinking about how do we bring, personal development, how do we bring coaching into learning and into school earlier on, or at least alternative education components. So we focus a lot on, finding your values. Why are our values important? What is that? Doing things like the personal SWOT, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats in your own career and your own choices, developing your own personal mission and vision. And I remember when we first started doing this in 2017, when we launched League of Innovators, people were like, oh, that's sort of silly and funny. Like, do young people really want this? And we said, well, yeah, we see successful entrepreneurs, they're using these tools. So why wouldn't a 15-year-old find these really important? And imagine if you could figure that out, or even have the first go at that when you're 15. And when you're 30 or 40, you're already on that next iteration. You have a lot more confidence. These tools actually enable you to understand yourself better, And in that self-awareness is actually what we find, you know, confidence, you feel empowered, you can make better decisions. And this is the biggest thing, is all these tools enable you to make better decisions because they're guides for you, right? So, so we do have a lot of that focus. And what we see is that is not part of school yet, right? Like those courses aren't. So I think for people that are interested in pushing the education system, it is about, you know, offering alternative ways that education can be brought to young people and the types of education that we can bring to young people.
I love that.
That's a really good point, right? Education is very content driven as opposed to contextual, right?
Totally. Yeah, exactly. And it's not about, you know, when we teach, and I've taught at universities too, I teach entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship. And, you know, part of the project is you got to build a social enterprise or you got to build a startup. And all the students are like, well, how am I going to get an A? And my answer is like, you just have to go through the process and tell me what you learned, which is such a foreign, so simple, but it's such a foreign concept because that moment of that process of reflection hasn't really been taught. And that process of just doing and then learning and doing it again, you know, it's just like you do this test and you got an A or B or C, but.
Yeah. Oh gosh, we could dive. I'm going to swing over to Tina for a minute. We could dive so deep into the intersection between personal development, personal awareness, whole leadership, you know, impact, you know, wow. Yeah. So deep. Tina, I'm curious with your listening ears on this morning, what's really landing for you?
Well, I knew I was going to have to work today. I've got a mind that goes like that, like, okay, like, whoa. It's like we've had the whole conversation in the first 5 minutes and all of the pieces are already here. I'm not going to go into tracking yet, although I am, because there's 3 parts of the bridge that have already arrived. The piece I do want to go to is, it happened right in the very beginning, Joanna. I think when you talked about working with young people and the state, that's what I heard, is like the state of an innovator. It's almost like the inner life of an innovator. Young people haven't figured out that they're not innovators yet. That the very state of youth is the state of innovation. And then we went into this up, down, like surface, well, where I had an ocean image. So it's like, we're on the surface and we're talking about the system. And then we're down at the bottom, we're talking about the state of innovation. And then we're at the surface and we're talking about how to fix or what to fix. Then we're down at the bottom. And I thought it was really fascinating that when you said that those who are in, the noticing of those who work in social impact, that they are, that in this great state of change, it's almost like they already had the inner work or something. They already had some sort of like inner system that prepared them to shift, move, pivot, whatever. And then I went to, okay, so whoa, like there is something about this state of young people, and then connected to social impact, connected to how to be in change. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, because this is your area of mastery, your body of work is working with these young people in this state. I'm wondering if you would be willing to share your noticings about what they're already doing so well. So those of us who've been in the system for so long and may have lost our way to that inner state can remember what's inside us.
No, that's such a great summary and sort of surfacing of some of these topics. And when we talk about youth innovation, and you know, a lot of the times when we go out and have first contact with some organizations or companies come to us, they're like, oh, young people they start businesses and social enterprises that actually work, that actually make money, and they sort of like raise their eyebrows at us. We're like, yeah, no, they do. And we've got a whole list of them, and then more, they're everywhere, right? And we start diving into like why that actually is. And the first and foremost part is actually to do with like human biology and the science of neuroplasticity actually shows us, the research has shown us that young people between the ages of 15 to 25 have the highest rate of neuroplasticity that drops down after the age of 25, when you get into your mid-20s and later on. And neuroplasticity actually allows us to change our brain and enables us to have that creative thinking, to have innovative solutions, to be able to tackle problems in a new way without having the barriers that perhaps we've built up over our years of education system work, etc., conditioning. And so, in fact, when we look at it, 15 to 25-year-olds are actually at the prime time to be thrown into complex problems, because they're able to look at it and be able to think about problems in a completely different ways if they're given the tools to do so. And so that's the first thing. The second is, when we look at young people throughout generations, they've always been part of the group that's driven change systemically, whether it's political movements, advocacy, etc. And then we look at what's happening now in the world, and the generations, Gen Y and Gen Z coming up. They're the generations that have grown up with the internet. They're digital natives, what we call. They have access to all the social media, all the internet tools, and all the information that no other generations ever had at their fingertips. At the same time, they've also grown up in a very almost volatile time, now coming into like a third recession within their lifetimes, massive political unrest and movements. And so that all in itself has enabled young people, not enabled them, it has actually made them, be more questioning of what's happening in the world, made them be more, apprehensive about the future, in terms of, the future that's been set out for us isn't actually the future that we're going to have, because, climate change is dooming, yet nobody's doing anything about it. And we've seen this with the Greta climate action strikes and that movement, for instance. And so young people are really stepping up to the plate. And like I said earlier, they are coming up with ideas and solutions on their own terms, because their perspective is like, well, nobody else is going to create the future that we want. So let's just create it on our own. And again, it's the young people that we've had an opportunity to work with are no different. They are standing up to adversity, and they are leading the way in creating innovative solutions on their own terms. And I do think it is the concept of youth. I think there's a perspective from older generations that young people need experience, you need degrees, you need money, all these things to create impactful business or impactful social enterprises. But in reality, you really need to have a vision, and you need to be passionate about the impact that you want to have. And that sometimes is the driver that sets people apart in terms of those that are able to stick with it and create that impact.
Mm. I'd love to head into, you mentioned what you actually do need as a youth entrepreneur, as anyone who's interested as a leader to create change. And you mentioned you need vision, and you need passion. Yeah. And there's a couple of things that I'd love to add to that, and also bring this next part of the conversation into, okay, we've kind of been playing in the social impact space for the last 6 or 7 years. Yeah. And we know what we know. Some of us know more than others. We know what we know. And so now, and we know how important it is. It's no longer something that's just an extra little, corporate responsibility project on the side. It literally has to be, we need change and to do better in every single level of business and government. So I would like to add 2 words to this conversation. The first one is the word bridge. Like, we really do see Powerhouse as being a bridge between women in our generation and young people, young women, young people coming up in the next generation. We also see ourselves in a point where, being a bridge is a bit of a scary place to be, because you're literally bridging to the past of what you know and how it's always been done, and you're bridging yourself over like a back bend. I don't know if you ever did walkovers as a kid, but like a back bend into what we want things to be for the next generation in 2030. And but that's the role, you know, that I think we see ourselves playing. And then the last word I want to bring in is the word bravery, to add to your list. I heard a quote in a podcast about a week ago that it'll stay in me forever. And it was just, you cannot be innovative and not be afraid. You just can't. You literally can't. You can fool yourself that you're an innovator, but if you're not walking in fear and like not really knowing the next step, but you're just being brave, having faith and taking the next step, you're not a true innovator. That was the gentleman's point in this podcast. And I have to say that I agree. So I'd love your thoughts on where we've been, where we're going, how we could do better with what we've learned, you know?
No, I love that. Actually, I think that's so on point. You know, if you're truly doing something innovative, that means it hasn't been done before. And there is no formula for doing it. There's no checklist. So you have to make it up. And that is really scary, doing things we've never done before. I think that's a really important part of learning and being innovative. One of the things we try to really instill in the young people and just anybody that I work with is to instill that is, you know, when you feel that fear, it means that you're actually onto something. It means you haven't done something before. It means maybe you need to voice that opinion that it's really scary to put out there, but it might actually be the thing that exactly what you need to be doing because your voice needs to be heard, or that opinion needs to be out there, or this innovation or startup that you're creating is actually really, really important. So, I mean, we see that across the sectors. And, you know, where are we going and how are we going to get there? I am super actually confident and optimistic about where we're going. And it sounds crazy in the midst of all of this, but I do think what this time has shown us is that we can change. Change isn't as crazy as people imagine. We've seen massive companies for the longest time being apprehensive of going into work from home, digital first type of deal. And, you know, it's going to take years to change our whole workforce, and they've done it overnight. So change is possible. And it's always, you know, it's people think it's impossible till they do it, right? So first that, I think second is that massive systemic change is also possible. If a company can change, you know, their 20,000 person workforce to go digital, and we can start having conversations about racism and anti-racism in a matter of a week across North America and beyond, in a way that's no longer like a faux pas, right? Like that that it's become, you know, a mainstream conversation, and that CEOs have to step down because they are not, you know, they're not being forward thinking, they're not being empathetic, they're not looking at the social good. That massive systemic change is actually so possible, and we are just limited by our own constructs, right? I mean, all the systems that are in the world, we've created them. So we can unbuild them and dismantle them. And so I think all of that is so possible. And so I think it's going to take all of us. It's going to take young people. We know young people have the potential, the ideas, let's help them. But it's funny because people are like, they think they can do it on their own. I talk to so many young people. They don't want to do it on their own. They want the mentors, the advisors, the folks from all generations, because everybody can add value. But it's about how can we all be in a conversation together, be around a table together to create, you know, the new future that we want to see. And so I think it's like, let's start having those conversations, because it's more than possible. And when we do, that's, you know, we know that when there's diversity around the table, that's when we have the best ideas, then we can have the most socially innovative a change. And so I think it's encouraging everybody to feel like they can do that. You know, I always tell folks that are interested in supporting young people, to go and mentor them, go advise them. If there's a, you know, board you're on or a committee, go invite a young person. That if there's no young person there or people of diversity, bring those people on board. I think it's like, it's for us to make that change and make the way, right? I mean, it's exactly the conversations and narratives that are happening right now. It's not only for the people that have been, you know, oppressed for the past, you know, hundreds of years to be the ones that drive change. It's the other folks that are the white people that are in the room, and maybe people that are more affluent or had more privilege to make room for everybody else to come sit at the table. And I think that's the role that I think a lot of people are waking up to. And realization that, you know, they can make a difference. And you know, you don't have to be that advocate and protester on the street. There's so many ways you can create change, and the world requires all that to happen.
I want to jump in for a sec, and I'm actually going to like tag, I'm going to like volley or tag my Christina friend over there in the concept. I love the way that you named, again, we're doing this like this, the two sides of the bridge kind of thing. Like we keep coming into this. I love what you said about, we can't do it alone. And yet there's something about, it's going to take young people and we can dismantle our own systems. And I, as a mom of teenagers, I always say to them, I always listen to teenagers because you don't mess around. Like you don't mess around. You may not have wisdom yet, but you actually are willing to stand on your own with a position. You haven't let go of that yet. And so I wonder, and so I want to go to Christina because she works in politics and it really is the dance of the leader, and the leader who's willing to be passionate enough to say, I own this on my own with these people to make this happen. And I'm wondering if you can speak to, in systems, Christina, what I'm talking about.
So, Tina, I'm going to take a little bit of a different thread, because you picked up on something that really landed for me, and that is when Joanne was talking about that young people are maybe less fazed by complexity and uncertainty, that there's actually a need for us to not only mentor them, but actually have them mentor us within the system. Like we're experiencing system disruption. And so we're actually not doing them a favor by bringing them along. They're doing it's actually a co-created relationship that I think is really, really necessary. And so the bridge, our organizations, our systems are designed to be risk averse. Education, healthcare, government, they're so risk averse, and we live in this environment that doesn't deal well with uncertainty and complexity. And so given what we know about neuroscience and neuroplasticity, we actually need that type of because the ground has been washed away from underneath us. We actually need them to help us navigate those uncertain waters. And I love what you said about that things can happen quickly. And I get frustrated because I work within a system oftentimes that is so antiquated and rigid and I feel like a voice in the wilderness. But just hearing that now is the time for we're experiencing disruption. Now's the time. Let's take hold of it, and let's gather our young people who are nonplussed by the uncertainty and complexity. Let's gather them and utilize their skills and join forces, right, to move forward. I'm
just going to say bam. That's exactly it. Bam. Thank you, volleyball friend.
So I want to give Joanna like kind of some closing space as we wrap up this part of the conversation, and then we open it up to have a bit of a conversation with everyone. And so many amazing pieces have come forward, but one of the things that I just want to reflect on and be held accountable to is I think things will move forward fast from here on. And one of the reasons that Gather is so powerful, I think we've already seen it in one of the things that I'm personally really dedicated to is starting to pull change makers together to really coordinate efforts and synthesize as and when it most makes sense to create change. And Joanna and I've had, numerous conversations in the past, and I think that there is a role that Powerhouse can play to be of service to what League of Innovators is up to in the world. And so I just, again, want to kind of echo what we've talked about before. I don't know what that looks like, but I know we have a lot to learn, and I know we also have a lot to give. And just as things move forward, I just want to kind of put that out there, Joanna, because there's nothing, I think one of the most brilliant things that we can do is to really work together to connect change makers who are in different areas making change, and make sure that it coordinated action, or at least people knowing what's going on is really beneficial. And if we can do that and amplify that through Powerhouse, then that's what we can do, right?
Amazing. Yeah, that's I think there's always room for that, and there's opportunities for mentorship, for amplifying the voices of young people, of the work that they're doing. There's so many ways to, obviously get engaged, and Charlene, we've talked about the sort of the some of those, and I think to the Powerhouse community too. I think there's amazing women that are part of this community, and our youth will be lucky to have mentors and advisors from that network, right? So I also, in terms of also, I think what I always talk about to just our social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, and where we see a lot of people get stuck. It's funny because I see our American counterparts aren't as stuck in this sometimes. And we talk to a lot of accelerators, incubators down in South as well. And it's a bit of like a matter of perspective. And I say this to, again, like I said, young entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders too. And I think what we get stuck in is thinking too small about the impact we can have and the work that we can do. And I think if we look at our values and then really think about our visions, I think it's really important to encourage people to think really big. No one would have thought that, systemic change or big movements were possible. And then they were led by, 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, and they're possible. I think it's just about, and it surprises, it shocks a lot of people, especially, adults from generations where they were just conditioned that that's not, you got to follow a path, right?
Right.
So it's just like thinking big and being able to lean into that.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. I'll finish up the formal part of the conversation, and thank you so much for what we just started to hit on today. But I think a lot of great things came out of today, and so grateful to have this conversation.